Yesterday afternoon, the BC NDP and the BC Greens released the details of their backroom deal that will see them attempt to govern the province once Christy Clark loses a confidence vote in the legislature. If you're wondering about how all this is going to work out logistically, check out my video from yesterday, where I break down some of the most likely possibilities. After filing that video yesterday, we heard from Premier Christy Clark, who told us she has a duty to test the confidence of the legislature as early as the first weeks of June. And so far, she's indicated she will not be resigning, even if she continues on in opposition. Shortly after that, the BC NDP and the BC Greens released their agreement that will see the three-member Green caucus support the BC NDP on all supply and budget matters, which are confidence votes, over the next 4 years. But it also outlined their agenda. And I hate to say it, folks, but get ready for some hard left environmental socialism. The first big ticket item is that the British Columbia will be getting yet another, our third referendum on electoral reform in the fall of 2018, concurrent with the next municipal election. This one will be a referendum on proportional representation. The question for the ballot will still be determined, and the form of proportional representation will also be decided after what they say will be consultations with British Columbians. This is the big ticket item for the Green Party, who would, for instance, see a dramatic increase from 3 to 14 or 15 seats if the last election was conducted under straight proportional representation, as they earned 16.8% of the popular vote. But we already know from looking at social democracies in Europe that do not elect a head of state that it can become a very precarious situation where political parties, not the people, make backroom deals to see who forms government and what special interests are served after small parties agree to put their support behind the bigger ones. The only positive that I could see coming out of this is that Conservatives may have a true second option other than the BC Liberals, with the BC Conservatives or whatever party goes on their right flank. Christy Clark's promise to freeze the $30 a ton carbon tax will also be scrapped, and $5 a ton increases will start as soon as January 2018 and continue every year thereafter. The Greens and NDP have agreed to refer the Site C hydroelectric project to the BC Utilities Commission, despite the fact the project has already been under construction for around 2 years. However, their document only references the current state of electricity supply and demand, not the future, which is extremely short-sighted the way I see it. There is no doubt in my mind that electricity demand will only increase in this province as the population increases and we increase our reliance on technology, electric vehicles, and potentially look to power new industries like LNG. Speaking of LNG, there is actually not one single reference to the industry in the jobs and climate section of this agreement. As for the Trans Mountain Pipeline, well, the news is not good as you might expect. Let me read from the document. Quote, "Immediately employ every tool available to the new government to stop the expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline," unquote. And more news today that should John Horgan become Premier, he will go to court to fight the project, using our tax dollars to do so, of course. The Greens and NDP also want to establish a commission which will outline a path to a $15 minimum wage. And I can only imagine this will be similar to what we just saw Kathleen Wynne's Ontario Liberals roll out this week, a policy that was immediately condemned by the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, and one that will undoubtedly lead to more automation and many job losses. Many other ideas in the document are simply ways to increase the size of government and the public service. They want to, for instance, create an emerging economic task force. Whatever that means, it will be stocked with Green and NDP MLAs that will, quote, "develop made-in-BC solutions that keep our government, our policies, and our thinking on the cutting edge." Gosh, that sounds like a boondoggle of epic proportions, doesn't it? But not to be outdone, though, they will also establish an innovation commission, because we all know the left doesn't believe that innovation can come from anywhere else besides government, right? There are also references to increased spending on schools, hospitals, and other public infrastructure in the name of reducing emissions. But is there anything in this agreement that could garner widespread and bipartisan support? I think there is only one item. It's the creation of a mental health and addiction ministry that will be tasked with dealing with the opioid crisis. And it is a crisis. More people are dying from addiction than any time in history. Even at the height of the crack epidemic in the 1980s, the numbers today are far higher. We're losing over 100 people a month in Vancouver alone. Separating addiction and mental health from the traditional health ministry is a good idea, but only as long as the new ministry does not grow larger than it needs to be. After all, we are going to see enough increases in the size of government under this BC Green and NDP agreement. As I mentioned yesterday, this is not yet a done deal. Christy Clark is still Premier, and she may still have a couple cards up her sleeve. And of course, she is premier until she's defeated, and the lieutenant governor agrees to let this NDP agreement proceed. Which actually in itself isn't a certainty, as the lieutenant governor could see this as such an untenable situation and agree to call a new election instead. So get ready, folks. Buckle up for a wild ride in the coming months in BC. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson. Thanks for watching. Keep it locked to our Rebel Canada YouTube page for all your updates over the next few months from British Columbia.